10 feet below the frozen surface of Alaska's most unforgiving terrain, where temperatures often plunge to -40 and daylight disappears for weeks, lies a secret sealed in ice, one that prospectors say could be worth over $5 million. This is not the glittering gold of storybooks, but gritty, coarse placer deposits embedded in ancient glacial sediments. It takes more than luck to reach it. Out here, gold isn't mined, it's battled for. And every season begins with a race against time and nature itself. The tundra may appear motionless, but it conceals a landscape in flux, where permafrost shifts, collapses, and devours anything left unattended. These miners aren't weekend hobbyists. They're seasoned survivalists, former mechanics, engineers, and ex-military, united by a single goal: to unearth treasure from ground that's been frozen for over 10,000 years. Satellite maps show the crew's claim nestled along a bend of the Yukon River Basin, 60 miles from the nearest paved road. Helicopters are the only reliable way in or out until the summer melt, and even then, swollen rivers and soft ground make extraction perilous. Beneath them lies the real challenge: ground frozen solid year-round, except for a thin summer skin. The gold they chase is locked inside layers of glacial till dense, cement-like sediment that's almost impossible to dig by hand. To reach it, they need firepower, both literal and mechanical. Diesel-driven thermal lances, known among the crew as frost cannons, are used to inject superheated air into boreholes drilled into the ground. Around-the-clock shifts keep the machines going, melting the earth inch by inch. It's a high-stakes operation. If the temperature drops too low, even these machines freeze up. But the payoff is real. Historic data and test pans suggest this stretch of creek holds unusually rich pay dirt, possibly deposited during a rare glacial retreat thousands of years ago. Yet, as the first frost cannon roars to life, blasting steam into the frozen crust, there's no guarantee. The gold might be deeper than expected. The thaw might be slower. The crew might lose precious days to weather or malfunction. But in this remote patch of Alaska, where the land keeps its secrets buried deep, one thing is certain: the hunt has begun. Their camp isn't much to look at, just a scatter of prefab trailers, steel containers, and massive diesel tanks, all lashed together by heavy cables and snow-crusted hoses. But it's the nerve center of one of the highest-risk, highest-reward mining operations in North America. The location is unforgiving, a secluded tract of land north of the Yukon River, just a few hundred miles below the Arctic Circle. In the heart of winter, this area endures 20-hour nights. Even in mining season, the sun offers only slanted light and frigid winds that slice through triple-layered gear. Wind chill can drop to -50, and the air is so dry that exposed skin begins to crack within minutes. Despite the brutal environment, the setup is precise. Each shipping container holds a different role: workshop, fuel depot, part storage, and living quarters. The crew of 9 men and 2 women rotates in staggered shifts, working 12 hours on, 12 off, 7 days a week. Inside the bunk trailers, walls are lined with insulated foam, and diesel heaters hum constantly to keep the temperature above freezing. Outside, nothing sits idle. Machines left cold can seize up permanently, so engines are kept running or plugged into block heaters, fed by an industrial generator the size of a small truck. The team's foreman, an ex-oil field rig operator named Jake Redmond, knows the risks better than anyone. "We're 40 hours by snowcat from any help. Out here you go down, and it's on your crew to get you back up," he says. Every member is cross-trained in basic mechanics, first aid, and survival. Communications are maintained by satellite relay, and there's a single high-bandwidth uplink shared between laptops, GPS units, and emergency comms. Redundancy isn't optional, it's survival. Fuel is another constant battle. Diesel, the lifeblood of the operation, begins to gel below -15 degrees Celsius. To keep it usable, they circulate it through preheated tanks, pumping it non-stop between machines and insulated storage bladders. A single freeze in the line can disable a multi-million-dollar rig. The cost of transporting fuel to this site is staggering. Each gallon is airlifted in or brought across frozen rivers by custom-built sled trucks during a 2-week window in early spring. Every drop wasted is a loss to the season's bottom line. As the last of the setup concludes, the sense of anticipation is palpable. Ice-crusted beards, diesel-stained gloves, and faces weathered by frostbite all gather under the pale Arctic sky. The frost line is almost ready to be breached. But the real test lies just beneath the surface, inside a frozen earth that won't give up its gold without a fight. Before a single ounce of gold can be sifted from the soil, the crew must face their first and most stubborn opponent, the permafrost. The ground here isn't just cold, it's a geological vault, locked tight by millennia of deep freeze. To access the pay dirt layer, where placer gold has settled, the miners must first thaw a vertical column of earth up to 10 feet deep and spread across an area the size of a football field. It's a slow and brutal process measured not in hours, but inches per day. The crew deploys an arsenal of heat-inducing machinery. At the center are 3 custom-built diesel burners known as frost cannons. Each cannon uses an industrial compressor to force superheated air down narrow steel pipes bored into the frozen ground. The cannons roar like jet engines, pumping out air at 700 degrees Fahrenheit, enough to melt through rock-hard silt at a rate of half a foot every 12 hours. Their metal skins glow red against the snow, and the surrounding area steams like a geothermal field. Operating in 24-hour shifts, the crew maintains constant attention to these machines. Ice buildup on valves, pressure fluctuations, and fuel starvation are daily hazards. At one point, a frost cannon shuts down without warning, its pilot light extinguished by a backblast of moisture. It takes 2 workers nearly 3 hours to get it restarted, using torches, heated blankets, and a dangerous workaround involving a second cannon to share ignition heat. But thawing is only part of the battle. As the ice liquefies, the ground turns unstable, soft on the surface, rock-hard just beneath. To prevent collapses, the miners dig small test pits to measure thaw depth, marking progress with wooden stakes and GPS logs. They alternate thaw zones to avoid creating sinkholes, leaving one area to soften while another is excavated. The logistics are choreographed down to the minute, with timers and thermometers mounted on the main work trailer to track each zone's status. Even with optimal conditions, progress is painfully slow. In a 24-hour period, the crew might thaw enough ground to run 2 truckloads through the sluice, barely a fraction of what's needed to stay on schedule. And the clock is already ticking. Their permit allows just 90 operational days, and any delay eats into their gold recovery window. As the first strips of black, muddy pay dirt begin to emerge under the melting surface, morale lifts. There's the unmistakable scent of earth, not the dry, dusty kind, but rich, waterlogged soil that hasn't seen daylight in thousands of years. Somewhere inside that muck lies the beginning of their payday. But getting it out will test every machine, every back, and every ounce of resolve they've brought into this frozen battleground. Just 3 days into operations, with only a thin layer of thawed ground cleared, disaster strikes. In the middle of a night shift, as sub-zero winds whip through camp and ice crystals hang in the floodlight beams, a sudden alarm blares from the main heater control panel. One of the frost cannons, the most powerful and recently serviced unit, has gone offline. Within minutes, steam lines freeze, pressure gauges flatline, and the entire thawing network loses heat synchronization. Jake Redmond and 2 crew lead sprint to the machine yard, headlamps cutting through freezing fog. What they find is worse than expected: a sheared turbine shaft inside the cannon's compressor housing. Without that turbine spinning, there's no airflow to generate heat, and no way to pump warm air into the frozen ground. More concerning, the damaged cannon had been running a central zone near the river bend, a key corridor where test pans had revealed the highest gold concentrations. Now, with the thaw halted, the pay dirt there could refreeze solid within hours. The decision is made quickly. Redmond orders a full system stop across the site. It's a costly move, $12,000 a day in lost diesel, downtime, and wages. But trying to run the other heaters without synchronized thermal coverage risks damaging them too. Worse, uneven thawing could create structural voids under the working area, raising the chance of a cave-in or ground collapse under the weight of the excavators. Inside the equipment shed, the mechanics get to work. They drag out old shaft blueprints, and pull a matching compressor from a rusting generator salvaged from a defunct pipeline job. It's not a perfect fit. The bolt pattern is off by 2 millimeters, and the coupler joint has to be ground down by hand. Over 16 hours in shifts of 2, they work with hydraulic presses, torches, and portable welders, barely sleeping as sleet patters against the metal roof above them. Outside, the air temperature dips further, hardening the thawed ground like concrete. Moisture from the unfinished pits begins to refreeze, causing cracks and fissures to creep along the edges. The mining crew uses hand shovels and pickaxes to salvage what they can, removing small pockets of thawed muck before they freeze solid again. It's grueling work with little reward. By the evening of day 4, a jury-rigged replacement shaft is ready. The cannon is hoisted back into position with a winch line and braced with welding rods. When the ignition is triggered, there's a tense moment of silence. Then a boom as the cannon roars back to life, flame licking from its exhaust. The ground team cheers. Heat returns to the system. But they've lost nearly 36 hours, and the clock won't stop ticking. With the mining window already razor-thin, the crew now faces mounting pressure. They'll have to accelerate excavation, double-run the sluice, and push machinery harder than planned. It's a gamble, but out here, risk is the only constant. By dawn on day 5, the entire operation hangs by a thread of improvised engineering. The faulty frost cannon, now armed with a hybrid shaft assembly built from scavenged parts, kicks back into operation, but it's running hot and unstable. The crew knows it's not a permanent fix. Vibrations ripple through its frame every time the compressor hits peak torque, and a small fuel leak around the re-welded valve has to be manually drained every hour. Still, it works. The frost cannon belches heat into the boreholes, and the thaw continues, but at a fragile cost. To stabilize the system, mechanics install a pressure bypass using spare hydraulic hoses from an old loader. The loop relieves strain on the compressor head, rerouting excess steam into a gravel-filled sump trench. It's crude, inefficient, and borderline unsafe, but it keeps the temperature inside the thaw lines above 500 degrees Fahrenheit, just enough to melt ground at a steady pace of 4 to 6 inches every 12 hours. Redmond approves the plan with hesitation, knowing full well the risks. A rupture in the steam hose could scald anyone nearby in seconds. So a rotating guard post is established. One crew member remains within sight of the cannon at all times, bundled in thermal gear and carrying an emergency shutoff pole in case something goes wrong. With the thaw system limping forward, the rest of the crew pivots back to excavation prep. Using track dozers and a Komatsu PC300, they begin shaving off the top layer of now softened earth, carefully stripping it down to the pay zone. The upper layers are mostly barren glacial overburden, but underneath lies the telltale false bedrock, a clay-rich layer where gold typically accumulates in streaks and nuggets. The first full truckload of thawed pay dirt is loaded by noon, hauled across rough terrain to a waiting stockpile near the sluice deck. Spirits lift, but not for long. The broken cannon groans under strain. Its makeshift shaft begins showing signs of wear, and temperature readings fluctuate by as much as 80 degrees Fahrenheit, enough to slow the thaw or risk a burnout. Redmond calls an emergency meeting and proposes a bold workaround. Stagger the remaining thaw zones, running 2 frost cannons at full output while rotating the weakened unit between smaller test areas. It's a logistical nightmare. Hose lines must be reconfigured, fuel usage doubles, and thermal balance becomes nearly impossible to maintain. But the team agrees. There's no backup equipment this far out, and sourcing replacement parts would take a helicopter drop and a week they can't afford. So the crew works through the night again. They rotate shifts in 6-hour blocks. One crew thaws, the next excavates, the last repairs, and the cycle repeats, relentless and unforgiving. By the end of day 6, the thaw line has extended another 6 feet, enough to uncover the first major trench of pay dirt. It's a hard 1 inch of progress. But beneath their boots lies the gold-bearing clay that could tip the season. If the frost cannon holds, they might just keep their $1 million zone on schedule. The moment the thawed trench reaches minimum depth, the heavy machines roll in. First to move is the Komatsu PC300 excavator. Its claw bigger than a man, teeth sharpened to chew through semi-frozen earth like packed concrete. Operator Taylor Briggs climbs into the cab, buckles in, and lowers the boom with surgical precision. Below him lies the red zone, a ribbon of iron-stained muck laced with flecks of gold, clay, and shattered glacial rock. It's a mix that could mean tens of thousands per truckload, or nothing but back-breaking waste. Each bite of the bucket scoops out roughly 1.2 cubic yards of pay dirt, heavy with moisture and the pungent scent of rotting, organic matter long buried. With temperatures hovering around -10, steam rises from each scoop like breath from a giant. The excavator swings wide and drops the load into a custom-modified rock truck, its bed reinforced with steel liners to handle the dense, wet material without seizing or freezing. Across the site, a second Cat 336 joins the dig, opening up a new trench line parallel to the first. These dual excavators operate in tight choreography, careful not to overload the trucks or compromise the trench walls. Each pass must avoid icy ledges and hidden boulders that could jar the machines or trigger mini landslides. The thaw may have softened the surface, but just inches below still lies permafrost, which can fracture unpredictably under pressure. Rock trucks rumble back and forth along the haul road, their tires wrapped in anti-slip chains to prevent spinouts on ice-covered slopes. Drivers keep to a strict one-way route to avoid collisions. At the staging area, trucks reverse up a frozen ramp and dump their loads onto a stockpile beside the sluice deck. Every load is logged by weight, GPS point, and depth, a digital record crucial for tracking yield and identifying high-grade pockets. Inside the control shack, Redmond watches the flow on a live map, tagging each dump zone and directing excavators to the richest areas. Test pans from the first few truckloads show promise. Fine gold streaks settling in the pan's riffles, dense and heavy. It's not the bonanza they hoped for, but it's pay dirt worth running. The site hums with motion. Dozers level new trench lines. Spotters with radios guide trucks in and out of the yard. Mechanics shuttle between machines, checking hydraulic lines and fuel levels in sub-zero wind. The physical toll on the crew begins to show: chapped faces, stiff joints, gloves stiff with ice. But morale is climbing. After days of battling steel and frozen soil, they're finally moving gold-bearing earth. Yet every hour the frost cannon holds is borrowed time. If the shaft fails again, or if the permafrost rehardens, they could lose access to this promising pay zone. For now, the machines claw deeper, pushing into the thaw with grim efficiency. They've broken the surface. The sluice waits. On the edge of the dig site, framed by ridgelines of snow and floodlights piercing the dusk, sits the operation's heart, a towering, rumbling sluice plant they call Goliath. Stretched across 70 feet of reinforced steel, it's more than just a gold separator. It's a mobile factory, engineered to process over 100 tons of raw earth per day. And when it roars to life, it doesn't purr. It screams. The process begins at the hopper, a massive steel bin with vibrating grates that shake frozen clumps of pay dirt into finer chunks. Rock trucks back up and release their loads, and the material crashes into the hopper with a sound like thunder. Hydraulic shakers beneath the grates force every stone, every clod, into motion. The dirt then flows down a conveyor belt into the trommel, a rotating drum the size of a bus, lined with spiraling lifters and high-pressure spray jets. Inside the trommel, the real transformation happens. Pay dirt is spun, tumbled, and blasted with water drawn from a nearby reservoir, stored in insulated tanks to prevent freezing. Clay dissolves. Gravel separates. Gold begins to drop out, subtle, dense, and barely visible. What remains is a slurry of fines and water. Flowing down the sluice runs below. The sluice itself is a marvel of engineering. Layered with miner's moss, metal riffles, and rubber matting, it creates controlled turbulence that traps heavy particles, like gold, while washing lighter material away. Each riffle is adjusted with millimeter precision. Too shallow, and gold flows right over. Too deep, and the riffles clog with silt. Crew member Juno Ray, a sluice tech with 15 seasons under her belt, watches the flow like a hawk. She tweaks valves, adjusts spray angles, and clears mats between runs, all to ensure no speck of gold escapes. This isn't the romantic swirl of a pan in a stream. It's industrial alchemy, violent and loud. The entire sluice plant shutters under load, vibrations echoing through the ground. Water sprays mist into the air, freezing instantly on nearby railings. Workers rotate in 90-minute shifts just to keep warm and avoid frostbite. The sluice deck becomes slick with ice, a constant fall hazard that requires cleats and safety harnesses. By mid-morning, the first mats are pulled. Gloves off, bare-fingered in the cold. The team peels back sodden moss to reveal a faint shimmer. Tiny flakes, specks, and the occasional picker nestled in the fibers. It's not much, a few ounces at most. But it's confirmation. The system works. The gold is there. And now it's about volume. Goliath keeps running. Load after load, hour after hour. As long as the machines hold, as long as the water stays unfrozen and the pressure lines don't burst, this custom-built monster will keep digesting the frozen wilderness one truckload at a time. The question now, can the team keep up with its appetite? By the end of the second week, the grind of continuous operation begins to show on the crew. Faces are raw from cold exposure, hands blistered beneath insulated gloves, and eyes bloodshot from 12-hour shifts under floodlights and blowing snow. The excitement of first gold has faded into the rhythm of industrial survival. Out here, every movement is a calculation, because one wrong step near a trench wall or a frozen valve could spell disaster. Frostbite is the most immediate and unforgiving enemy. Even through heavy gear, metal tools sap heat instantly, and sweat from physical labor freezes rapidly once the body cools. Crew member Juno Ray loses feeling in 3 fingers during a night sluice run and has to be pulled out early to warm up in the heated trailer. Another operator's nose begins to blacken at the tip before a medic intervenes with warm compresses and chemical packs. No one complains, it's just part of the job. But the danger is constant. Then there's the machinery. Every moving part in the sluice plant and excavation yard is under strain. Hydraulic hoses stiffen like bones. Grease hardens. Even high-grade industrial engines groan under the cold, their belts snapping from sudden contractions. Twice in 48 hours, excavators freeze mid-load, one locking up with its bucket extended in midair, requiring a rescue team with torches and heated oil to restart it. More perilous still are the thaw trenches themselves. As the frost cannons eat deeper into the permafrost, they create vertical walls of partially thawed soil, heavy, unstable, and deceptive. The surface looks solid, but beneath it, meltwater pools and softens the base. One morning, without warning, a section of the eastern trench collapses. Thousands of pounds of mud and gravel slide inward, taking a truck ramp and several steel support beams with it. No one is hurt, but the access road is buried. It takes 6 hours to dig out and reroute. Jake Redmond immediately tightens site protocols. All trench side work is restricted to daytime hours. Workers are now required to probe thaw walls every 10 feet using metal rods to test for hollows or fractures. Spotters patrol constantly, watching for movement. The safety officer updates evacuation plans, marking zones most at risk of a cave-in. Despite the setbacks, the crew pushes forward. They've recovered just under 80 ounces of gold so far, enough to taste success, but not enough to cover costs. And the richest section of the claim, located beneath a deeper ridge where the pay dirt dips sharply, remains frozen solid. To reach it, they'll have to extend the trench and increase thawing output. That means more fuel, more heat, and more exposure. It's a brutal balancing act. Push too hard, and the machines break. Slow down, and the gold stays trapped. And all the while, Alaska's wilderness waits to reclaim its hold, with cold, weight, and silence. It hits just after midnight, without warning. A sharp drop in barometric pressure, followed by gale force winds from the northwest, and then the temperature begins to plummet, fast. Within hours, it dives past minus 50 degrees Fahrenheit. By morning, even the wind is frozen stiff, scouring the landscape with microscopic shards of ice that strip paint from steel and skin from bone. This isn't just another cold day, it's a record-setting snap, colder than anything the region has seen in over 2 decades. and the site isn't ready. Before dawn, the first signs of trouble appear. Fuel pressure in the sluice pump begins to falter. Hydraulic oil thickens into syrup. One by one, machines begin to sputter and stall. The weakest link is the diesel fuel system. Despite heated tanks and insulated hoses, condensation inside the lines freezes solid, forming tiny ice plugs that cut off supply. The primary frost cannon, the patched-together unit already running on borrowed time, dies with a wheeze and doesn't restart. The two backup units, newer but still vulnerable, begin to show signs of strain. Inside the main control trailer, Redmond studies a wall of monitors and sensor readouts, his breath visible even indoors. The temperature outside is now -56, colder than the surface of Mars on a warm day. He makes the call, full site shutdown. Within 30 minutes, heaters, dozers, pumps, and sluices are turned off. Crews scramble to wrap exposed valves in thermal blankets and pump diesel back into underground bladders to prevent it from freezing solid in the lines. But the cold doesn't care. The generators, massive twin units feeding heat to the living quarters and equipment sheds, begin misfiring. Fuel filters crack. Battery terminals snap like glass. Water tanks rupture as their outer skins ice over and expand. The communications satellite dish ices up and goes offline, severing internet and GPS links. The entire site descends into crisis mode. The crew reverts to survival tactics. Propane space heaters are deployed inside the trailers. Emergency chemical warmers are distributed. Mechanics, wrapped in 3 layers of Arctic gear, move from machine to machine with blowtorches and heat guns, try to revive anything that can run. They fill pans with boiling water just to loosen ice from fuel caps and connectors. By midday, the wind picks up again, blasting the already frozen camp with gusts up to 50 miles per hour. Visibility drops to less than 20 feet. The air tastes metallic, dry, painful to inhale. Everyone moves slower, clumsier, focused solely on staying upright and unfrozen. 2 crew members suffer mild frostbite to their cheeks and forearms before they're pulled inside for treatment. The cold snap lasts 48 hours. When it finally lifts, the damage becomes clear. 3 primary fuel lines are ruptured. The frost cannon's compressor has seized. The sluice feed hoses have split in 2 places. Most devastatingly, the thaw trench has frozen over again. Its wet walls now transformed into brittle glass that will take days to remelt. They've lost nearly 3 days of work and a critical section of thawed pay dirt. Worse, the fuel reserves, never abundant to begin with, have taken a severe hit. Redmond calculates the numbers. If they don't find a way to thaw faster and more efficiently, the richest part of the claim may remain buried until next season. As night falls once more and the wind dies down, the crew regroups. They survived the cold. But now comes the harder part, catching up. The cold snap has passed, but its damage lingers in every frozen hose, cracked fitting, and stalled engine. With nearly 3 days lost, fuel reserves depleted, and the thaw zone partially refrozen, Redmond faces an unforgiving equation. There's just over a month left on the permit, and more than half the projected gold still lies buried beneath rock-solid permafrost. The team can't afford to wait for warmer weather. They have to force it, machine by machine, line by line. The crew springs into motion with a combination of brute force and ingenuity. They wrap every exposed fuel tank, engine block, and critical hose with thick, foil-lined, insulated blankets. Custom-made back in Fairbanks, these thermal skins are designed to hold in heat generated by block warmers and electric oils. In the trench zone, where no power lines reach, they resort to a more primal tool, open flame. Propane torches, sheathed in wind-blocking barrels, are used to manually thaw seized gearboxes and sluice pipes. It's risky work. One misplaced flame near a diesel vapor trail could turn the equipment yard into a fireball. Spotters with extinguishers stand by as mechanics crouch beneath fuel trucks and generators, coaxing warmth into steel with steady hands. Meanwhile, the sluice plant undergoes an emergency overhaul. The crew reroutes its intake system, adding preheated water tanks scavenged from old drilling rigs. These feed warm water directly into the spray jets, ensuring the trommel doesn't freeze mid-run. They reinforce pressure valves with rubber gaskets and wire heat tape around the intake lines. It's messy, expensive, and borderline improvisational, but it works. By the end of the second day, Goliath stirs back to life. It runs rough, growling and steaming like a wounded animal, but it runs. The frost cannons follow, 2 of them now operating on split-cycle timing to balance power draw and heat dispersion. Redmond allocates the bulk of remaining diesel to the thaw trench, prioritizing the richest claim sector, a deep gravel vein tracked by survey drones and test pits weeks earlier. With every thawed inch of ground, the excavators move in faster. Trench walls are trimmed back with surgical care to prevent collapse, and truckloads of steaming pay dirt pour into the sluice plant around the clock. The crew pushes their limits, 12-hour shifts stretch to 14, then 16. Meals are eaten standing up. Breaks vanish. The coal burns, but they keep moving. In a final act of desperation, Redmond authorizes the use of a mobile heating trailer, an old mine rescue unit retrofitted with a diesel jet heater and flexible ducting. It's towed into the deepest part of the cut, where the ground remains stubbornly frozen. The ducts are buried like tentacles, channeling heat into the ice-lock floor. It's loud, it stinks of exhaust, and the output is minimal. But by morning, the first thin crust of thawed muck breaks loose beneath the excavator's bucket. The breakthrough ignites hope. Gold content in the deeper cuts triples. Pans shimmer with fine flakes and small pickers, validating every ounce of fuel and every frostbitten hour. They're behind schedule, low on fuel, and running against the calendar. But they're in the gold again. Now it's a sprint. No delays. No margin for error. The frozen wilderness gave them another shot, but it won't last long.